From the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, this is a special edition of Inside Government with Cedric Peterson.
To our viewers here at home and around the world, welcome to Inside Government. In our edition this time around, we're going to be focusing on the height of the hurricane season, which we are currently in. And to get that conversation started, I've invited Head of the Meteorological Department of St. Martin, Mr. Joseph Isaac, to join us inside government. Mr. Isaac, thank you so much for joining us in this edition of the program.
Good day to you, Cedric. Good day to all your listeners. It's always a pleasure for the Meteorological Department of St. Martin to impart information to the public. Our policy is if we have the information and we cannot get it to the man on the ground, the information is of no use. So we always appreciate using conduits like yours to get a message out to the public.
Thank you so much for joining us. We have to focus in on our climate over the past few months. What is the current conditions of our climate here within the region, especially here at home? What has the climatology report been showing us?
There's a lot that the climatology report is showing, but it is not maybe as significant as a lot of persons would think. And when I say the climatological report, because we can look at whether we're talking about climate change or whether we're looking at 3 months, 4 months, that sort of thing, or if we want to zero in more specifically to the elements of the hurricane season. And I know that has been a lot of talk on the ground and a lot of persons have been asking, but it's a little bit quiet. It's very hot. We're not getting a lot of rain and so on. So basically, the climatology of the region would show that the earlier part of the hurricane season, most of the activity would be in the Gulf of Mexico and so on. However, as we go into the hurricane season, we would find that our area, August, September, we would have more events in our area. There's a sort of what we may want to say a delay in a lot of the activity. We still have the same number of tropical waves coming off the African coast. And if we take it a little slowly, we would have noticed a number of things. So while we haven't done our summary, for example, for August for rainfall, if we don't get any significant rainfall before the end of August, it would have been most likely there's a possibility it could be one of the driest August. However, we expect that to change. Some of the things that we have noticed is that the Atlantic high pressure ridge, which is very strong, it was sort of south. And as a result of that, it kept most of the activity, tropical waves and so on, to the southern islands. So Trinidad, Barbados, and those areas got a lot of rainfall during July and August. And it is normal, but some of that activity would have come closer to our region, but we haven't seen that happen yet. However, we can see that from the model, and there's going to be a migration of the high pressure system, and it's going to move a little further north. Also compounded with that is the high pressure system ridge is expected to weaken a bit. So we expect a lot more of the activity of the ITCZ, the tropical waves and so on, coming further up our area. And then we would see more of the impacts of more rainfall and so on. Hopefully, not too many storms, if any. The other element we have been looking at is the impact of dry air, and we always associate dry air with around this time with haze. So the significant amount of haze along with dry air. And we do not want to get misconstrued with this whole idea of haze. And I always like to say clear off, it doesn't mean that because you have haze, that's the element for no storms. And I like to give a simple example. If, for example, you have a small fire and you have, let's say, something from a match or a small piece of stick, and you take a cup of water and you pour on the flame, it will out. But if you have a mattress or a pillow burning and you take that same cup of water, you wouldn't put off the fire. So it depends on whether the other elements are there and whether the system has developed significantly enough or not for the haze to affect it. So if a system with all the other ingredients in all the other instruments are there for development. His would not necessarily not have a system developed, but would retard its development. If it is very early in the development cycle and if the haze is significant, you have a lot of depth of haze and so on, then the system would struggle to develop. So I hope we have that clear. But we, in terms of the other parameters, for example, sea surface temperatures, the sea surface temperatures are ripe for development. Earlier part of the season, we also had a lot of upper level wind shear, which is really not good for development of thunderstorm cells and hence tropical storms and so on. But like I said, when we look at the models, we're seeing a change in pattern in terms of all what was happening before, why we had that sort of dry period. And going forward, it looked like we would be going into the sort of norm of getting more significant weather in terms of tropical waves affecting us and so on in our region.
Sounds like as if we would like to get more of the rain out of those systems rather than any dangers, presented by tropical storms or hurricanes. When it comes to climate change and the effects on us here in the region, we always understood, of course, we don't contribute much to the global crisis when it comes to global warming as a region. However, we are deeply impacted by the effects of climate change. Within the Latin Caribbean market, Mr. Isaac, we are no exception. We're seeing the effects here within our region. Can you highlight some of the things we should be concerned about as it relates to climate change, specifically here in our region?
Well, in fact, in the region, we are actually a sink in terms of climate change, in terms of contributing gases to the whole impact of climate change. However, the results of climate change, however you look at it, will impact all countries, whether you contribute to it or not. So it's a matter of how do we change or adjust? So we have two things to look at. Whatever we can do to not contribute to it in terms of the impacts of climate change, and how can we adjust our lifestyles to what is to come. So we know straight off that from all scientific research and so on, we are expected to get more intense hurricanes, more Category 5 hurricanes and so on. The rainfall patterns are expected to have heavier showers. So the question then becomes, yes, you cannot really directly stop it. And then even some studies have shown that even if we did everything, stop using plastics and whatever that contribute to the destruction of the ozone layer, that it would take a number of years for us to actually see a change. So the question now becomes, how do we organize ourselves in that we can make ourselves as comfortable as possible with the changes that we will see as a result of climate change. And it has to do with how do we construct our homes, the whole architecture of our homes. Are we now, because we may have to use more air condition, but are we looking at maybe putting the roofs a little higher so you have more air going through the houses? I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but those small things we can do because if we're going to get more hurricanes and stronger hurricanes, how do you design your roof and build your roof so you always have a roof? Even in terms of the day-to-day run-ins, to knowing your environment, because for example, you would have been living in a place that you never had flooding before, but because of maybe the development that's happening around you, and also compounding with that heavier showers, you may find yourself now living in an area where that's prone to flooding. So how do you adjust and change your lifestyle in terms of those patterns? Because climate change, there are a number of different theories, but then when you come down to the end result of it, is what is happening now. And even if one will debate and say, no, we're just going for a 100-year cycle. In 100 years' time, things will change, but how many of us, where we will be in 100 years' time? So it's one thing to say that the Earth is we're going through a cycle in terms of it will go back down, but the impacts of what are significant. And if we have the impacts happening now, then we have to deal with them. And the message definitely would be knowing what to expect as a result of climate change, which we have been seeing over the years, and tying in our lifestyle to deal with it.
One of the key things I see coming out of the World Meteorological Organization's report on the state of climate in Latin America and the Caribbean from last year's report highlights some far-reaching consequences related to a few areas. Deforestation, even though we do not have forests, how can deforestation be applied to us here in St. Martin, even though we do not have forests, but we do have hills and trees? How can this principle of deforestation apply to us so that we could understand the effects of climate change and having an effect on us overall in St. Martin?
And you're very correct when you said we really don't carry a forest, but just the mere fact of vegetation cover. When you look at vegetation cover, the drier it is, and if we're going to have more drought periods, we're talking about more rainfall at a shorter period, but we're also talking about longer, drier periods. So if you're going to have longer, drier periods, you don't have very big trees, for example, in St. Martin. So a lot of times the area would get brown. As a result of that, you're going to be dealing with more brush fires. You're going to expose the surface of the soil. So once the soil is exposed and you don't have those trees, when you get rainfall, you're going to basically be getting more runoff. More runoff going to lead to more street flooding, and that street flooding going to be flash flooding because you have a lot of hills, and because you have a lot of hills, then the rainwater will come down with a certain amount of velocity that will cause flash flooding in the flat areas.
We're talking to head of the Meteorological Department of St. Martin, Mr. Joseph Isaac, and our series that starts as we get to the nearing of the peak of the hurricane season and how you can prepare and keep yourself safe. Our conversation continues right after these public service announcements. Stay tuned. During the hurricane season, a potential tropical cyclone can produce rainfall that can cause flash flooding and rockfalls. Residents in areas prone to flooding or near the coast should make the necessary preparations to protect life and property. Stay away from flood-prone areas during heavy rainfall, such as L.B. Scott Road from Emilio Wilson Park until Cake House Supermarket, Zaker's Gut from Petro Plus gas station until the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Welka-Laken Road in Cahill from Welka-Laken Road Roundabout until the One-Tete Loque Roundabout, Beacon Hill Road from Sunset Bar and Grill until the beginning of White Sands Road, Rhine Road, also known as Mullet Bay Road, after Sonesta Maho Beach Hotel, to the entrance of Kupakoy from the intersection of University Drive until the intersection of Rio Grande. For more information on how you can keep yourself and your family safe this hurricane season, visit stmartingov.org/hurricane. This public service announcement is brought to you by the government of St. Martin.
You ever hear Earthquake call and say, "Hello, Mr. Mara, it's me. Earthquake are coming in Tuesday around 10. No, sir. Earthquake does arrive unannounced, and when it comes, it'll shake all the sense and the sensibility out of we. Remain calm, stay inside, and do the DCH. Drop, cover, hold on. Once the shaking start and you know it's an earthquake, make a quick move to a safe place. Don't run to the doorway or any exit, and the stairs that may be broke up or even full of people. Elevator, avoid that because you might get in and then poof, power gone, and you're stuck in a box without air. Take cover under a strong table or a bed, or crouch against an inside wall or in a corner and cover your face and your head with your arms. Remember, DCH. Drop, cover, hold on. Glass windows and doors, outside walls in an earthquake, that is bad news. Take care of yourself. Most injuries during earthquakes happen when something drops and hit people entering or exiting a building. Last thing, don't bother run outside and ask, "You feel it? You feel it?" Remain calm, stay indoors until all the shaking stop and do the DCH. Drop, cover, hold on.
This public service announcement was brought to you by Sedima and the government of St. Martin. St. Martin. Come out to the Health, Sport, and Culture Expo organized by the Departments of Sport, Culture, and NAGICO. This expo will showcase over 80 organizations and feature free health checkups. Join classes in fitness, salsa, capoeira, yoga, Zumba, and witness our government officials tackle an obstacle course, all for the promotion of a healthy lifestyle. The Health, Sport, and Culture Expo, Saturday, August 27th at the Raul Elite Sports Complex, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. See you there. Hi, everyone. Welcome. If you have just tuned in, my conversation is taking place with Head of the Meteorological Department of St. Martin, Mr. Joseph Isaac. We're talking weather and how you can prepare for the peak of the hurricane season to ensure that you keep yourself and your family safe. We were talking about climate change and its effect on us as a island within the region of the Caribbean. Mr. Isaac, I see things like hydrometeorological hazards. First of all, define what is hydrometeor, or I should say, hydrometeorology.
Okay, meteorology would be the study of the atmosphere, so everything above ground. Hydrology is basically the study of groundwater and water below the surface. So, for example, the study of rivers and river flows or underground wells and that sort of thing would be the study of hydrology. Meteorology would be the study of the clouds, cloud formation, rainfall, and so on. So that is where it is tied. And you would get the statement hydrometeorological events because a lot of times when we say meteorology, sometimes we think of rivers flooding and so on, but it's actually hydrology. And they are two separate sciences. You could do a degree, a master's degree, a doctorate in hydrometeorology, just like you can do in meteorology. So there's two separate events. So, for example, a hydrologist would, as I said, would study things like river flow. A hydrologist would also study things like if you were a very high limestone country that you would have underground wells, or you would have there are actually countries with rivers underground. They would study those flows and so on. So that would be the study of hydrology. Meteorology takes everything from surface up.
So, when we're focusing on the specific hazards related to hydrometeorological hazards, what are some of the things that you're focused on?
Okay, so when we talk about hydrometeorological hazards, so we would be talking about things like rainfall, which would be meteorology. But then when you basically talking about less floods, if you had streams and stream flow and so on, then you'll be talking about hydrology. So to try and encompass everything, when we're talking about those hazards, we just use hydrometeorology. And sometimes persons wouldn't even use hydrometeorology, just use meteorology, but it would basically be hydrometeorology when we're talking about those events.
Increasing sea level rise and ocean warming. Explain through your professional eyes there, how does this affect us, especially as a tourism destination?
Well, if you look at the reports from the International Panel on Climate Change, there's a lot of discussion in terms of sea level rise. There's a lot of evidence to show that there are signs of sea level rise. Yes, we may feel that a couple of millimeters, how many years, is not significant. But especially with us as small island developing states, it is critical that we take those things into consideration because you're building for the future. And while our generation may not really see it directly, if you, for example, St. Martin being an island based on tourism, and if what you said is the beach, if you're going to lose the beach, then right there you already have a problem because your main marketing tool is gone if you do not have the sort of beach that you would like to market. So it's significant in terms of sea level rise and so on. There are other things. If, for example, you get too much salt coming in through your soils. Another practical example would be what we would see on Front Street. There you would notice that a lot of times the government has to be repairing the streets there all the time and so on. If you have sea level rise, you may think it's not significant, but you're going to get, because you have so much sand in that area, you're going to get a lot of more water under the street. And as a result of having more water under the street, keeping it at a certain level, you would have a lot of those issues in terms of maintaining the roads and so on because of the adjustments you would have to make. We could even go further and look at another aspect of it. If you have sea level rise and you have stronger hurricanes, we know the impact of the seas in terms of swells during a hurricane. Then if you have sea level rise and the sea is a little higher, then the waves and so on that's coming on that sea that is already higher will impact more because it will come more inland. And even we can even see that even with drought, just talking about sea level rise, when you're talking about high tides and low tides, it happens more in places like the US, Guyana, and those places. But then you would have more of an impact. And if you were to look at a lot of warnings and so on issued by the US, you'd notice that a lot of times they put a lot of emphasis if a storm is going to hit at high tide, because if a storm is going to hit at high tide and you're going to have a lot of the wind pushing the water in at high tide, then at high tide it means the water levels are already higher than normal. So it would go further inland. So these are the sort of studies and so on that we would need to look at. And that is why the meteorological department of St. Martin, we are futuristic thinkers. And we're putting everything in place because meteorology and hydrology, they're global. And sometimes I tell the staff that you do not just work for the meteorological department of St. Martin, you work for the world because your reports go out global and people use your work to get things done. And when I say that's why we are futuristic, because right now what we're looking at is looking at putting in a network of automatic weather stations so that we could have more data. So what we're talking about in terms of a lot of those things is just from my experience. I would know those things would happen and so on. But for example, if an agency wants to help you in mitigating those impacts, where's the data to actually show what is happening on St. Martin, sea level rise, changing temperatures, etc., etc. And we're right now putting in a very strong, robust climatological department that will have all that data. And we'll be also working with other government departments. For example, they have a project to monitor the levels of the lakes and so on. So that when we start to talk as St. Martin and when we go to the table in international functions, we can say, here is the data. Here's the data. This is what we're talking about. This is what is happening in St. Martin based on the data. So the network of automatic weather stations will do that. We're even speaking about air quality. And the air quality, yes, it will help climatology, but it would help persons with certain allergies and so on. We're really looking forward to that project. In terms of early warning systems and getting persons information, we're hoping that by maybe towards the end of September, our new radar will be installed and we will have that. Because the whole way, the whole system works under the World Meteorological Organization is that we contribute to a pool of data. And the more data and the better the data is the better we can get numerical weather predictions, so the better hurricanes can be forecast, better intensity of storms and so on can be forecast. So we play an integral role in the system. And that's why we spend a lot of time on training of staff, trying and as much as possible to get buy-in, to get our local persons to get involved in the field of meteorology as much as possible, so that we're not always looking external to bring in persons, because we have the capacity here and just train persons have a proper functioning network that can contribute to the global system.
And you and your team do a fantastic job issuing 3 forecasts per day. Highlight the essential information that your weather forecasts can provide when it comes to decision making by the average person up to government leadership.
Okay, we provide 3 forecasts a day, and like everything else, the challenge always would be if you compare here to the United States, for example. So if you live in New York, almost every morning, certain parts of times of the year, you would listen to the weather because you want to know how you're going to dress. With us in the Caribbean, it's a different ballgame. It's not that significant whether you have to pull a coat or not. You're just going out. But what we try to concentrate a lot on now is more like impact-based forecasting. It's very difficult, but we're trying to go in that direction. And I'll give you an example. It is one thing for me to tell a man on the street that expect 2 inches of rainfall in the next 6 hours, or from 8 o'clock tomorrow to 1 o'clock tomorrow, we're going to get 6 inches of rainfall. What is 6 inches of rainfall? You may have some background studies and so on, and you, as Cedric, may say, oh, that's a lot of rainfall. But the average man on the street, he really doesn't know. So how do we work with ROMI so that when the Office of Disaster Management, for example, would put out a message, that the message from DCOM would say, expect that area to be impassable because of street flooding and so on. That's what we call impact-based forecasting. Not just saying what is expected, but working with the other entities. And we do not have all the technical know, and that's why it is important as government, for us to see as government how we pull all those entities together to make the information as practical as possible to the man on the street. And that's what we fight for. So impact-based forecasting is very, very important to us. If I say, for example, we expect sea swells of 10 to 15 feet, what does that mean? It might mean something to the guy who captains a boat and so on. But what does it mean to somebody who is close to the sea? The person wants to know, would I need to move from my home and so on? And then you need added data in terms of the whole, how that area is in terms of the seabed and so on. So these are the sort of things that we're looking at. There's a lot of improvement that we need to make. There's a lot of improvement we made in the science. And we have to also understand during the hurricane season that sometimes we get an indication that a hurricane might hit. We may be lucky, move a little north or south, and we don't get any impacts, but we have to go through the same rehearsal when we get the information again. It is very critical that we know where we get information from, credible sources. Go on the internet, yes, get information, no problem, but come back and find out from your local authorities what are we saying based on the information that is out there, and how does it curtail to the man on the street, and what actions you need to take.
Head of the Meteorological Department of St. Martin, Mr. Joseph Isaac. Mr. Isaac, thank you very much for being in this edition of the program and sharing with us the meteorological insights and training that you have experienced over the years with us in regard to how we should view weather. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're most welcome.
And to our radio listeners, television viewers here at home and worldwide, thank you so much for being a part of this edition of Inside Government. If you've missed this edition of the program and my conversation with Mr. Isaac, be sure to catch video on demand in 2 locations: the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, that's facebook.com/SXMGOV, or subscribe to the official YouTube channel of the Government of St. Martin at youtube.com/Government of St. Martin. And for audio on demand, be sure to stay tuned to St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM for rebroadcast throughout the course of the day. On behalf of my colleagues down at the Meteorological Department of St. Martin and here at the Department of Communication, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks so much for tuning in.